Welcome to the Careers by Jenn podcast, episode 281. This time on the podcast, Jenn has a conversation with Peter Montoya about managing your team digitally. When working remotely becomes not remotely working, ask yourself, what would Google do?
You're listening to the Careers by Jenn podcast. I'm your host, Jenn Swanson. This is the podcast that helps you to get the job, love your work, and advance your career. Careers by Jenn is a listener-sponsored podcast, and if you like the content, please consider supporting the show as a patron. You can do so for as little as $1 a month. Head over to careersbyjenn.com and click on support to learn more. Are you a manager finding yourself having to do what you do best remotely? Would you like some insight into how to do that in ways that are better than others so that you can still be effective? Are you an employee hoping that your manager is listening to this? If so, you're in for a treat. Welcome, this is Jenn, and I'm glad that you are here today. This episode is recorded on the unceded and traditional territory of the Coast Salish people, including the Matsqui, the Kwantlen, the Katzie, the Semiahmoo, and the Stolo First Nations people. Friends, the project that I'm involved in, the Huddle Journeys, Huddol Journeys app, is now out finally in both iOS and Android, and I'm so excited for you to check that out and see what it's all about. I think there are some freebies to be had if you download the app and do that until the end of the year. You might even be able to take a journey before the end of the year for free. So check out the Huddle's Journey app. And this is a way for you to take a 7-day transformational journey all at your fingertips with very short lessons each day and then time to reflect and practice. And then the next day you get the next lesson. And there are all sorts of different topics. I've got one in there, a journey on overwhelm. Scott, my husband, has one in there on burnout, and we are both working on new ones, and there are lots and lots of other coaches and amazing mentors in there with different journeys for you to explore. So check that out in Android or iOS. It's called Huddol Journeys app. And let me know what you think. I hope you decide to take a transformational journey at some point soon. All right, today my guest is Peter Montoya, and I will tell you, this episode was recorded a long time ago, it feels like, back in the summer or the early fall, I think. And I'm very glad to finally be able to share this lovely human with all of you. Peter Montoya is a best-selling author, a leadership strategist, and a keynote speaker. He's on a mission to enable managers and CEOs to lead virtually. And with the world changing daily, we require new skills and perspectives. Peter is offering a key to unlock new leadership dimensions. He has unique insights into how best to lead, inspire, and transform those who are around him. And he believes now more than ever that we need transformational leadership. Peter has many accolades, including founding a multi-million-dollar company in software and advertising, specifically catering to the finance sector. And Peter has written 3 books on personal branding, including one of his best-selling works called The Brand Called You. So please enjoy my conversation with Peter Montoya. So Peter, how is leading a team different when you have to do it remotely?
Yes. Well, the principle is the same whether you're leading remotely or in person. And the principle is simple. People come first. So in the old model of leadership, people's authority came from their title. So they had a title and therefore we had to respect them. But today, we respect people based on the merit merit based on what they've actually done and then their knowledge and their insight. And secondly, and more importantly, it is based on the relationship. So when we're leading remotely, we have to take a couple extra moments before and after either phone conversations or Zoom meetings to make sure we're connecting with people to make up for the loss of the natural connection that happens before a group meeting. So Jennifer, if you and I were going into a group meeting, we had a group meeting with 4 or 8 of our colleagues, and we're all kind of shuffling into the conference room, we would be talking on the way in. We'd be talking on the way in about our weekends or our kids or whatever the news of the day was. We'd be sitting down and we'd be connecting again before the meeting starts. We as leaders have to kind of take some time to recreate that in the more digital setting.
And so it's an intentional step that you need to add in to what you're doing.
It really is. We need a second to still know that, yes, we have work to do, but the person who's on the other end of that camera cares about me.
Right. I know my daughter's been working digitally in a healthcare organization for, was working in an office setting, of course, until everything shut down. But because she works for physicians, and it's sort of the governing body of physicians, because she does that, they are all in their own homes with their computers and everything right now. But they actually have, during their work day once a week, and I don't know if this is, if it's every week or what, they actually have a structured social time where they gather. It might even be half an hour. I don't know if they have a particular question, but they all sign in, stop whatever they're doing, sign in, and have that, basically water cooler coffee time, but digitally. So sounds like it's the same idea.
It certainly is. We, as you know, Jennifer, we're not robots. And we really, as best we try to separate our personal lives and our emotions from our work performance, it really is impossible. And just by the simple act of us bringing up and saying, here's what's going on for me, it helps diffuse that energy so we can actually be focused more at hand. There really is, at the end of the day, no repression, no suppression techniques of anything that's going on for us, especially if it's causing any kind of anxiety or stress.
Now, when people first started doing all of this digital management, digital meetings, that kind of thing, I think we're all really much better at it. People have realized they can't take their laptop to the bathroom when they're on screen. I know there was stuff at the beginning where people forgot to turn off their cameras and were eating food or doing things. I think people have figured that out by now. But what happens when you see people, when you're holding a meeting and you're a manager, you're a leader, you're holding a meeting and you see people with their cameras off, with their, you can't just look around the room to see if people are listening or engaged digitally.
Yeah, you're right. So whenever you're doing a meeting, you really want to require cameras, and that needs to be a cultural norm for every organization. The reason that cameras on is so incredibly important is it dramatically increases both participation, attention, and also kind of our emotional engagement. When our cameras are off, we're much more likely to be doing something else, trying to quote unquote multitask. And I think we all know that multitasking is a myth. There's only singular tasking, and we're switching between 2 different things and not very successfully. And so the cameras are absolutely a critical norm for every organization to make sure that the time you spend actually in meetings, you're participating, fully engaged, so you're actually contributing to the solution, whatever issue is being talked about.
So I also wonder if it's imperative for the manager, or whoever's calling the meeting and chairing the meeting, to be aware that it takes more energy, and there is such a thing as fatigue when you are not in person and when you're just looking at little boxes. And there is a I've read articles on this. There is a difference when you're not physically together. It's tiring to be watching for facial expressions on 15 people across a screen. And now I've lost the question I was about to
I can answer it though. I know where you're going, and I got it. So yes, it is more energy draining being on 8 hours of Zoom meetings than it is in being 8 hours of real world meetings, because by and large, when we are actually facilitating it, it's much more intellectually intensive. Our brains are only about 4% of our total mass, and it consumes 25% or more of our calories. So there's a lot of computing power going on there. And you're right, when we're actually facilitating meeting, we're actually emoting it much more. I noticed that I talk louder, that I'm more energetic on Zoom meetings to make up for it. And when we're in real world meetings, it's much easier for us to quote unquote, read the energy of the room. We can kind of pick up on people's moods and whether they're leaning back and they're leaning in, whether they're concerned, whether they actually like what's being said. And those are all really important cues for a leader. Oftentimes, it's not what's said we have to be aware of. It's what's not being said, a lack of enthusiasm, a lack of buy-in. And that's harder to get for us to gauge as leaders on a Zoom meeting.
Yeah, I've been in my other work. I lead an organization and often have 20 people on a Zoom screen, and I'm constantly looking to see what the reactions are, and also it's a little more challenging, I think, to moderate who gets to speak next. Because my screen will have people in a different order than everyone else's screen. And so there are some other things that come into play, I think, as far as being the leader of a digital meeting is sort of, the conversation is different when you're on screen, I think.
It is. So there's all sorts of different norms and considerations, both for us listening, which is more than half of a leader's job to be actively listening, and then also in facilitating it. I think in person, in real world meetings, we're much better at moderating how long we speak and what we're speaking about. And oftentimes in a Zoom meeting, when we're called upon, oftentimes we have nothing new to add, but we feel the need to fill airspace anyway. And so we'll be saying something else that somebody already said that's not moving the conversation forward, which can be another part of the drudgery of meetings when they're not actually being moved forward on a regular basis.
So I think my other question is it absolutely necessary? It would be a good question to ask. Is it necessary to have this meeting? And is it necessary to book it for an hour and a half like we used to when we were in a boardroom? Or is it better to say, let's make it 45 and Zoom through it? Pardon the horrible pun.
Yeah. That's a great question. So my forthcoming book, which will be out here in December 2020, is called Meeting Without Walls: How to Lead the Perfect Virtual Meeting. And the first step of our model, which is PEP, which is planning. So planning, execution, and pull through. And so some of those planning questions are: who needs to be on the meeting? What needs to be covered? How long do we need? And by and large, for an hour-long meeting, you can cover 2 or 3 topics. But once again, it kind of depends how big those topics are. And so if you only have one topic, you may only need 20 minutes or a half hour for that matter, and get you really smart about who's going to be on it. And by and large, with any luck on important meetings, we should be spending about a half minute in preparation for every 1 minute of meeting. So if we have an important 30-minute meeting, we're probably spending 15 minutes planning that meeting to make sure we've got a good agenda. We know who's on there. We know what the decision points really are. So it's a very focused, executed 30-minute meeting. Now, if you've got a 30-minute meeting, which is not critical, not important, maybe it's a more brainstorming meeting, you may not spend a half minute for every minute of the call.
Yeah, I've been on a few board meetings that have that I have not chaired, someone else is chairing, and that has an agenda that's 2.5 pages long, and the meeting is a full 2 hours.
Painful.
And we're not stopping. We're going, point by point by point. It's absolutely exhausting.
It's exhausting.
It's necessary and important, but it's, thank goodness only once a month. But
Right.
I just find them exhausting.
I understand.
Yeah. So it might be better to break those up into smaller meetings, but then it's also hard to get people together. So
It is.
Yeah.
Yes.
So what are some
sometimes having a 2-hour meeting is the best of the bad solutions. I agree.
Yeah, because everyone, it takes so long to get people their agendas set. Mind you, I'm working with mostly volunteers, so it's a little bit different than working with people who are, paid to be there from, 8 to 4 or 9 to 5 or whatever. So can you give any other tips that would specifically be this meeting without walls, the idea of how best to lead people digitally when you can't actually walk around to the offices and see people? You don't know what they're doing all day unless you're on a Zoom meeting. How can you tell how things are going?
So, so first of all, we gave the first one, which was planning. The second part of the PEP model is execution. So here's what I'll tell you. There are 6 different acts of leadership. And I'll see if I can remember them by memory. I may not remember them all in order. But oftentimes when we think about a leader, we think about somebody standing on a stage and orating in front of hundreds of thousands of people. That is probably the 6th most common act of leadership. And on that list, I'm not going to go in order because I don't remember all of them exactly in order, but on that list are also your work product, one-on-one meetings, your gosh, I'm forgetting about some of these today. Your training, and probably the number one act of leadership for most white collar professionals is meetings. So we're spending about half of our days either in facilitating meetings or participating meetings. It is an incredibly important act of leadership. And I think today that every good leader has got to learn how to facilitate a meeting, which is the execution portion of a meeting. And that really means for a leader today, it means much more about listening, about raising oftentimes the outside voices that we don't normally hear from. So we're getting a balance of opinions, a balance of perspectives, and we're coming up with not only the best solution, but consensus around the best solution. And so oftentimes we think about a leader being a great communicator, and we usually think it means being an orator or articulating an idea, but really at least half of that is actually listening and getting really good participation. So the E of our PEP model is execution.
And I wonder if there are times when it's better to pick up the phone. I don't know.
Versus sending an email or a text or having a group meeting?
Or doing a digital face-to-face thing.
Yes. Oftentimes the phone is just quicker and faster, and we can knock through the issue very, very quickly. We don't always need a Zoom meeting. You're absolutely right about that.
And we don't always need, I don't know about you, my inbox is out of control. We don't always need an email either, I don't think.
Yeah. So, a good leader really is smart about picking the right modality for communication. So, it might be a text if it is a quick reply. It could be an email if it's a very brief discussion, information sharing. It could be a phone call if you need to collaborate between one person, and a conference call if you've got to collaborate among multiple people. So you got to pick the right medium depending on how much collaboration you need, how much discussion you need in finding a solution.
I was reading a book that a guest that I'll be interviewing later sent to me on communication, and she was talking about generational communication. And I wonder if you have some thoughts around that, how you might communicate differently with different generations in your organization.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. There are some people who will still only want to talk by phone, and some people who only want to communicate digitally. So I really believe the most important job of a leader is actually leadership development. And leadership development means creating a culture. And so oftentimes it's up for the leader of an organization to create the communication norms for the organization based on what's most effective. And then based on those norms, the people of the organization need to toe the line and communicate that way, whatever is best, depending on what type of organization it might be.
Right. Yeah, because it can be, that can be challenging too. I remember an administrator, a colleague of mine had an administrator who would print off emails and walk them down the hall because she didn't understand or know how to forward them.
Right. That is a little bit dated, isn't it?
It was a little bit, but it was kind of interesting. So what is the P, the second P?
The last P is pull through. And that really is to make sure that whatever is decided on in the meeting gets executed afterwards. So out of the meeting, it needs to be very, very clear who does what by when. And then those people actually execute it after the meeting.
So your action items. And,
exactly. It's the leader's job in those meetings to figure out who does what by when, and design that plan, edify it in writing, and then make sure it's pushed out so people know exactly what they have to do.
That sounds good. So can you tell me a little bit about how you came to be doing what you're doing now?
Yeah. So I'm going to give you the short history because I think it's interesting. I have a degree in political science, but I didn't have the grades or scholastic aptitude to go to law school. And so you only have a couple of choices. You can go into food services, you can become a waiter or a bartender, or you can go into sales. So I went into sales and I went to work for the biggest motivational speaker in the world back in the early 1990s. And more or less, I was a front man. So my job was to go out and speak to different companies. And I basically sold tickets to his one-day sales and motivation course. From there, at 28 years old, I realized that I knew it all and was worthy of starting a business. So I became an entrepreneur and started an advertising agency specializing just in financial advisors. In 1999, I wrote a book called The Brand Called You, which was one of the first books, a forerunner on personal branding. And so I did 2,000 speeches on personal branding and sold 100,000 copies of that book and built an advertising agency all about building personal brands for people. Then in 2006, I converted my business into the software business, and I created a marketing automation company called Marketing Pro, which I built and sold in 2018 for a really good size exit. So I've had a long career, not only as a speaker and an author, but as an entrepreneur. And now I'm in full-time leadership development. I'm more or less instilling the leadership development principles that I use to get exponential growth out of my businesses into other businesses. I had very, very incremental growth until about 2012, when I really kind of cracked the code on leadership development culture. And that's when we started getting exponential growth. And now I spend all my time consulting and training on that business model.
That's good. So developing leaders all over the world. Are you working globally?
Largely just in the United States right now. I really understand the United States model incredibly well. There's not a business or business problem that I have not faced and conquered.
There you go. Inspiration for people listening. So what would be the number one quality, and this is not an easy question, but the number one quality that you look for in a leader?
Oh, great question. So, there's different styles of leader. And for my style of leadership, which puts people first, and we look for what's called a factor 5 leader, someone who balances all the interests of 5 different shareholders, which includes the shareholders, the actual shareholders that own the business. We're looking for the employees, the vendors, the community, and the environment. So we're looking for a factor 5 leader who actually has all 5 interests involved. We're looking for somebody who is incredibly humble. We'll call it off the pedestal leadership. On the pedestal leadership is when somebody thinks they're better than everybody else. They are impervious to feedback or criticism. All of their orders or demands are unquestioned, and they usually segregate themselves from the workforce. And that is the antithesis of the leadership style we recommend. We recommend an off the style leadership, which means the leaders are very collaborative, very humble. They recognize they are no more valuable valuable or more or less valuable than any other human being on the planet, even though they may have more authority. And they realize their most important job as a leader is to make better leaders than themselves. That's what I think is the most important objective for any leader today.
And why is that for you?
Well, number one, it's how you grow organizations today. You'll only get incremental growth if you only have one leader in an organization or a handful of leaders. If you want exponential growth, you want to turn everyone in the organization into a leader. That's reason number one. And reason number two, it is the most rewarding work I think any human being can do, which is, transformational leadership, to work with somebody such that they see a new version of themselves that they didn't know was there. There is nothing more rewarding than when somebody has a new understanding of who they are and what they're capable of.
That resonates for me. Part of my job is growing leadership, and there's nothing more exciting than watching somebody launch and knowing that you're obsolete, you're not needed anymore because they've got it and off they go. That's my favorite part of all the things that I do.
I know. Our job really is, as a leader, is to make ourselves obsolete.
Yeah. I love it. Well, that's great. Well, Peter, where can people find out more about you and find out about your books and all the things that you're busy doing?
So our book, Meeting Without Walls, How to Lead the Perfect Virtual Meeting, will be available in December on Amazon, Barnes & Noble, and any online bookseller. You can always find me, being a personal branding guy, at petermontoya.com, just like it sounds, petermontoya.com. And I have an amazing course, which is for both consulting and training for organizations, called the High Performance Organization, where we actually convert managed organizations, into leadership organizations. We really want to see growth and impact based on the companies that we consult with.
Wonderful. And do you have one last piece of advice for the Careers by Jenn listener today?
Yeah, I do. We're running into this massive massive political cycle, and I got to tell you, the most important job, one of the most important jobs of a leader, is to tell the truth. Nothing is worse than a leader who misleads their followers for their own gain, which is why one of the most important skill sets of a leader is that of skepticism. And skepticism is to basically build a reality based on facts and truth. All leadership, all collaboration, all decision-making starts with a common assumption of what the facts are. And once we can all understand what the facts are, then we can actually move forward. So any leader who distorts reality for their own gain is not a leader who we want to be around.
Absolutely. Wise words. Well, thank you for taking time to speak with us today. I'm sure that this will be very valuable to people, and I look forward to learning more and reading your book.
Thank you, Jennifer.
You've been listening to Careers by Jenn with Jenn Swanson. If you like what you heard, please share this. If every single person listening today shared this episode with just one friend, our audience would be twice as big, just like that. And the more people we can help with our content, the better. So help out a friend and help grow our audience by sharing this show with someone you know who would benefit from the content. If you haven't subscribed yet, please do that, and together we can make a difference. Until next time, take good care.